I do remember one time when I was still working at a nonprofit, I had a client who had AIDS. It was around the time where new treatments were coming out. Social Security actually sent a spy to spy on my client, and they took picture of him and say, well, you were able to go to the cafe, so why couldn't you go to work or something like
Yeah,
that. I
yeah,
don't
yeah.
know. So and this is not unusual in the private insurance world.
Welcome to the Just Build Wealth podcast. I'm Ryan Ross.
And I'm Mike Ross.
The Just Build Wealth podcast is focused on simplifying wealth building. If you're trying to understand the strategies, systems, and processes that go into building companies, assets, and wealth, you're in the right place. With each guest, we aim to dig into their business and the industry they work in to gain a better understanding of how they are building wealth for themselves and helping others do so. Hi everyone, this is Ryan Ross. For this episode of Just Build Wealth, we talk with Andy Chu about rest. And in the conversation, we kind of turn the world of disability insurance into what you would consider probably a fascinating conversation on how and why people are actually lawfully able to get paid to rest. We talk about this from the perspective of which states allow you to rest the most. We talk about penalties for fraud. Interesting conversation there. And we talk about where disability insurance fits into an able-bodied person's financial life. Ladies and gentlemen, Andy Chu. Andy Chu, welcome to Just Build Wealth. Thanks for coming on the show. Give me 30 seconds about who you are and what do you do?
Well, I'm an attorney. I work as an attorney, and I help people take medical leave. I help them get disability income while they're on medical leave. So technically, that's what I do. But what I really want to do is help people rest, and so that they have the time to heal. I think that a lot of people, they don't know. A lot of people don't know that they have disability income. They have federal and state protection to help them take time off from work so that they can rest. And resting actually helps people heal. Maybe it's the number one reason why people can heal. So that's what I do. I help people rest and heal. So
yeah. I read that you wrote a book about that. I want to get to that in a second. But I did some research and I found that you had a degree in, I suppose you still have the degree in anthropology. And I'm curious, how did this translate to disability insurance?
Well, I think the ancient hunters and gatherers did not have disability insurance, probably.
Yeah.
But there's no translation. I was young. I was, at UC Berkeley, and I wanted to study something that was meaningful to me, and I wanted to know where we came from as humans and where we're going. So it did not have anything to do with law school. I went to Hastings. Now it's called something else. So it had nothing to do with disability insurance.
Yeah.
No, actually, I think I always had a deep interest in humanity. I think that it's kind of sound cliche, but I do think that, I have a certain passion for the human race. So maybe that's why I study anthropology. And I think the same passion propels me to want to help others. I had worked at a nonprofit for over 15 years. I recently began my private practice, but before that, I actually did a lot of public interest work in the law. Yeah, so I guess it is kind of related.
Okay. I read that also you were born in Hong Kong, I believe.
Yes.
I'm curious if there's I lived abroad. I was born in California, but I lived abroad, and I can point out distinct differences between the places that I've lived. What types of differences have you experienced between Hong Kong and the US or California?
Well, I can't say for all of California. I think I live in a bubble. I live in San Francisco.
Sure, yeah.
I think that when I'm in Hong Kong, when I'm in San Francisco, I am a person of color or a Chinese person, when I'm in Hong Kong, I just am,
Yeah.
But what people don't know is that I actually don't know how to write that well in Chinese. So, and sometimes because I left Hong Kong for so long, some of the words I use is very old. And so people can kind of like, when they hear me talk for a while, they're like, wow, this guy sounds really, like from another period of time or something, from a K-drama, those really old ancient drama. So I don't really feel like 100% at home anywhere in the world just because of how I grew up. I grew up in New York City. Because when I first moved to the US, I actually moved to New York City first. Then when I discovered something called San Francisco, I left New York and I never went back to New York to live in New York City. But even in New York City, I was never 100. I never felt like this is my, I lived in south of Brooklyn where there was a huge Orthodox Jews population, and I certainly wasn't. I didn't look like an Orthodox Jew. I didn't dress like one. So asking me the differences, I would say it's all the same to me. It's just a variety of different cultures and colors, and I enjoy them.
Yeah, I was gonna say you were talking about how you talk like an old Chinese person when you're in Hong Kong,
Yeah.
unless you ran into an anthropologist. I felt like they probably wouldn't catch it that quickly, but I don't know.
No, they do. It's like
But they do.
sometimes like like if people use some terms from the like I don't know, like the older generations, like that we don't use anymore right now, you would see, wow, we don't usually say it like that
Sure.
anymore in California, like that's the reaction sometimes I get.
I see.
Yeah.
And well, let's shift a little bit, and we'll talk about disability insurance. And I'm just thinking in the
Okay.
simplest terms, right? What is it, and what does it cover?
So, in the simplest term, disability insurance is a wage replacement. So if anybody cannot work because of an illness, then they can use disability insurance as a wage replacement. It replaces some of or all of their wages, right, for a certain amount of time. The key to understanding disability insurance is actually understanding the definition of disability. So in the book that you mentioned, it's called The Art and Law of Rest. Um, I, I, after studying all the different kinds of disability insurance that we have in the United States, state, federal, and commercial, which includes ERISA, I created this definition illustrated with a triangle. So the 3 points of the triangle is illness, income, and work. So basically, if you have an illness that affects your ability to work and your income, these three things, right? Illness, income, and work, then you have a disability. Now that's the basic definition. It's basic. It's good that it's basic because it applies to federal disability income. It can apply to state disability income in California or in New York or in Puerto Rico, and it applies to the commercial disability. So if you are a W-2 employee, you might have a disability policy through your employer. We call it ERISA policies. So these ERISA policies also use the same definition of a disability, right? So if illness, inability to work, and effect on your income. So anyone that sees these three things in their own life, then they should start thinking about using disability income to replace lost wages.
I saw an article that you wrote, and it said, "Don't take an unpaid medical leave, take a paid medical leave instead." And I'm curious, like, how is that done?
I wrote that article because during COVID, I went to see my banker at a large, I'm not going to tell you the name of the bank, but it's a very large bank in the United States, in the world. And she told me that, I was like, oh, I didn't see you for a few months. What happened to you? And she said that she took a leave because COVID was affecting her so much that she was very depressed. And she said she took about 3-4 months off for mental health. And I asked her how that was like, and it was really difficult because she didn't get paid during the leave because she had accrued like 2 weeks of vacation, but after that she was on unpaid leave. And I was like, well, were you seeing a doctor? She said yes. Did you get medication for your your depression? And she was, yeah, I was very sick with depression. And then I asked, why didn't you apply for disability benefits, knowing she worked for this gigantic bank? I'm very very certain that they had disability income benefits. And she said, well, nobody told me. So when I went to the HR and asked for a leave, they just say, okay, well, you want to take a leave? This is, you just, sign this form, and that's it. And they never told her about disability income that is available through her company. So, so that's why I said, well, you should have taken a paid medical leave, not an unpaid leave. So because of that, I decided to write this article. And what people should do is follow. There's really a 7-step process. It looks long, but it's really simple. It's in the book, but I'll just say it right now. So step 1 is actually talk to your doctor, right? Because you need your doctor to certify your disability income claim. So the first thing is, do you have a doctor that you can talk with about your illness that can actually sign off on your claim, on your disability claim, right? Because if you don't, it doesn't matter whether you're disabled or not. No one will vouch for you. You cannot get disability income. But once you have secured that, that support from your doctor, then the second thing you should do is actually get to know your disability income benefits. And a lot of times employees are afraid to do that because they don't want to let the employer know I might go on disability. So, short of asking HR or your supervisor, you can actually check your pay stubs. A lot of the disability benefits is actually deducted, right? From the premium for disability insurance is deducted from the paychecks. So it might show up in your pay stub, or you can check your employee handbooks. So there are other ways to check what kind of a disability income that you may have. So that's step 2, right? Check what kind of protections you have. Step 3 is actually decide when to start working, if you haven't already, right? So some people, they have already stopped working. So for example, you had an accident or you got diagnosed with cancer and you need to go on treatment right away, right? So you already stopped working. But if you haven't, like let's say like in this case that I was talking about, this woman, she could have said, okay, I'm going to work 2 more weeks and I'm going to stop working and go on a medical leave and get paid using disability income. She could do that. So the third step is really, figure out when I want to stop working. In our field, we call it day last work, DLW. So decide a DLW. And that's a decision that, sometimes not sometimes, you should actually make that with your family, your loved ones, with your doctor. It's something that all of you should, have some input on. And once you have decided that date, then you should apply for the step 4 would be to apply for the benefits. So one is you want to protect your job, right? You don't want to lose your job when you go on medical leave. So the step 4 would be apply for the job and health insurance protections. And that's basically FMLA, FMLA, Family Medical Leave Act. It's a federal law that protects your job and your health insurance while you're on medical leave. So it protects you up to 12 weeks, every 12 months. And that's just sort of very basic. There's a lot of other qualifications, but these are not stringent qualifications. Many people qualify for FMLA leave protections, right? So apply for that. And then step 5 is to apply for disability benefits. So FMLA is just to protect your job and health insurance, right? So that when you're off, you have your job to go back to, you have the same insurance that you had when when you were with your employer or still working, actively working. But that doesn't give you income. And that's what happened to that woman. She applied for job and health insurance protection, but she did not apply for income benefits. So step 5 is apply for disability income. So in California, most workers have state disability, right? If you check your pay stub, you'll see an item that says CASDI, California State Disability. It's a great benefit. It pays around 60% of your wage, and most of the time it's not taxable. And that's a weekly maximum benefit amount of about $1,600 a week. So that's not bad, $1,600 a week, right? For many Californians. And that's the max. And it pays up to 52 weeks, right? As opposed to 26 weeks of unemployment. So, so it's a pretty good benefit for people who just want to take, let's say, 3 months off to rest and heal. So after you apply, then step 6 is really rest and heal, right? And maintain your benefits, because getting on benefits is the first step. You still have to maintain your benefits. So for example, if you're no longer receiving a wage through payroll, they're not no one is paying your health insurance premium, so you have to actively pay your health insurance, right? So you make sure that you pay the like Blue Cross or Blue Cross or Aetna directly. So make sure that you're still seeing your doctor, so that when it's time for them to recertify your medical disability, they could. And step 7 is really what I call consider your future. So let's say your leave is for 3 months, right? What do you want to do after 3 months? You want to go back to the bank, or do you want to find another job? Or do you just want to take a longer break because you're so burned out that you want to stop working for 6 months rather than 3 months? So that would be step 7, is to consider your future.
Andy, you mentioned within that very accurate and thorough description, you mentioned the state of California, and which leads me to wonder whether there is a wide variance of different benefits on a state-by-state basis in the United States. Is it all over the map, or is it everything stay consistent? What's the perspective on that?
It is all over the map, literally and metaphorically. It is all over the map. So there are 6 states that, 5 states and 1 territory that originally have a state disability. So it's California, New York, New Jersey, California, Rhode Island, and then Puerto Rico. So after that, a lot of other states started to catch on, but they did not create state disability. They did something else called paid family medical leave. And that is like a disability income light version. I call it light because they don't pay that many weeks. They pay like maybe 12 or 20 weeks. And it's also for yourself and sometimes and your family. The problem with the PFML is that, well, I wouldn't say it's a problem. It's not uniform. So some states actually protect both the job and the income, and some states only protect the income but not the job. So it's very state specific. So like Mike said, it is really all over the map.
Hello. Quick reminder to check out justbuildwealth.co for all past episodes and the transcripts for the episodes. Also at justbuildwealth.co, you can find links to register for upcoming continuing education webinars. While you're there, pick up a copy of The False Hope of Global Diversification. Now back to our conversation with Andy Chu. Are there some ailments that are like better covered than others, or that get better support than others?
Well, I think, health insurance, well, not health insurance, but disability insurance company, like any insurance companies, they don't want to pay. So the question is more like, is there some illness that is harder to get paid?
Yeah. Okay.
And there are and mental health. Yeah. So they consider mental health illnesses as what, quote unquote self-reported. So they don't know if you're telling the truth or not. They barely trust you. I mean, they barely trust your doctor and you. So they usually have a limitation. And I'm talking about the commercial insurance like Unum or Lincoln, MetLife. So they will say that, if you have a mental health claim, it's usually limited to 24 months of payment. So even if you're, suicidal after the 24 months, they won't pay you because that's a limit. So there are other kinds of self-reported diseases other than mental health. So like migraine, they consider that to be, self-reported. I think a lot of pain, so like back pain, neck pain, if there's no objective evidence, objective mean like you can see it on an MRI or you can see it on X-ray. If there's no objective evidence for it, and it's just you reporting that you feel all this disabling pain, it's going to be hard to get on disability. But usually this is for we're talking about long-term disability. For short-term disability, or or you're just getting a few months of short-term disability, usually it's easier to get. The reason is because the insurance company is going to say, okay, well, if they just want 3 months of disability payments, the short-term disability insurance is only for 3 months anyway, right? The policy is only for 3 months or 6 months. They will pay you that amount of time, and that's it, right? But if you're looking at a longer policy, like a long-term disability policy, they will review you all the time just so that they can kick you off. So it really depends on what type of policy you're applying for. Usually, if you're applying for, well, I shouldn't speak on other state, but for California, this is a state program, it's a government program. They're not going to be as vigilant as the private companies in trying to kick you off. So if you have a mental health claim, it's probably easier for you to stay on state disability than for you to stay on a Unum policy or a MetLife policy.
Yeah, it makes me think like if there's a way for them to question like the validity of your claim, right? Harder to say I have a headache than like my leg obviously has a rod in it from the fence that I tripped over. It's harder to dispute that, right? This reminds me of this story where this like gangster in the 70s in New York, he would always claim insanity. But it's hard to claim insanity if you don't have like a history of doing things. So he would make a point of like going into the street and shouting at nothing. So people would be like, oh, that guy's obviously insane. He does that every Thursday and Tuesday or randomly, So it's like harder to report that. But there's no question like, oh yeah, there's definitely a tumor. If you have an MRI that says you have a tumor, I think it's like the objectiveness of the ailment might be the way to frame that, I suppose.
Yeah, well, certainly the insurance company frames it that way. But we're getting better. I mean, even with health insurance, they're not supposed to discriminate against people with mental health illness and try to get coverage and services for mental health. So there's supposed to be what they call parity, right? So we're advancing as a society, but we're not totally there yet. So a lot of people with mental health issues, there's a lot of stigma because people don't believe them, and that disbelief translate into the insurance system, our disability insurance system, where the insurance company doesn't really believe that you're so sick, and even if they believe it, they have a legal right not to pay you.
So, Andy, I'm going to put on my financial planner hat briefly here, and I'm going to make the statement instead of asking a question. I want you to tell me if I'm right or wrong. I've always believed that when someone is beginning their career and they have an income, before investments, before insurance, or life insurance, the first thing they need to make sure is covered is their disability insurance. That's the first thing. Would you agree or disagree with that rather provocative statement?
I don't disagree. I just don't know enough, like the statistics, to agree or not agree. But I certainly don't disagree. I think it's really important. I do see a lot of younger people on disability. A lot of it is mental health. And when I used to work in a nonprofit, we, of course, did disability advocacy. A lot of our younger clients are actually disabled because of mental health issues. A lot of trauma from families, a lot of drug use. And some of them, if they did not have state disability, they would be homeless. Now, some people, state disability is not enough because they're high earners. So that $1,600 a week is not going to cover their expenses. So for these folks who are younger, high earners, they're making $200K a year, which is not that difficult to do in the Bay Area, for many people. They're not gonna, their expenses won't be covered by that state disability. So they should actually apply, they should actually either secure individual policy, right, when they can, or they hold on to that group policy, or they use that group policy while they're employed. And if they leave the company, try to convert it into an individual policy. I asked you, what do you think of that? Do you think conversion is actually a good idea, or should people go out and buy individual policy?
Well, they simply need to have it.
That's the
first thing. The chances you're going to die are far lower than the chances that you're going to have a disability. So it's like the first thing you want to think of in terms of financial planning before you get involved in anything else.
I want to talk about the book, right? You wrote the book, The Art and Law of Rest, and the title is interesting to me because it sounds like rest is covered by law, and that makes me think people have a right to rest. Is that true?
Yeah, we have a right to rest. We have a right to not work and take care of ourselves, our health, our mental and physical health. It's important to mention mental health because a lot of people think that disability income is for people who are obviously disabled, right? You're in a wheelchair or you're locked inside the hospital, for psychosis or something. But it's really not like that. So if we go back to that triangle, as long as you have a serious illness that affects your ability to work and your income, right? It could be your past income, right? Or your future income, then you should consider applying for disability. People do have the right to rest because how else are you going to get better? How else are you going to heal? I think there's a lot, actually, I'm not a medical doctor, I'm not a biologist, but there are a lot of studies that say that resting actually is the reason why people heal, or at least a major factor in people's healing. So I think people do have a right to rest. It's part of their FMLA protection, the Family Medical Leave Act protection. In California, we call it CFRA. CFRA that's a California state's version of FMLA. So people do not only have a right to rest, they have a right to income when they're resting. They have a right to get disability income. It can be the state disability. It can be the ERISA policy for short term. And if they decide to go on a longer rest, I call it a disability break in my book, they should get paid using the ERISA LTD, long-term disability, or Social Security. The SSDI, Social Security Disability Insurance. And with SSDI, people also get Medicare. After 24 months of SSDI payments, people get Medicare. And then Medicare can lower their medical costs by a lot, usually. So definitely people have a right to rest. And the book is called The Art and Law of Rest because the first part of the book is really about the first part of the book really helps people figure out whether they should apply for disability benefit or not. Or in other words, whether they are disabled according to the disability income system. And that's an art. There's no formula. That's something that you have to decide for yourself. It's not like there's a matrix, there's a formula you can plug in and say, okay, yeah, I am just right above this threshold. So now I'm disabled, I need to apply. No, you have to look at your life. You have to look at, are you with a supportive doctor that can support you? Do you have the disability insurance, either state or ERISA or individual policy, if you were wise enough to get one out there on your own? Will you be financially supported if you go on disability? And if you do, how long can you be off work? So this is an art. This is something that you have to figure out yourself. So that's why the book is called The Art and Law of Rest.
I think we've covered the when disability insurance applies, but to shift to more of the cynical mode, what are the penalties for fraud? Let's be honest, there's a subset of people that when they apply, they don't really, shall I use that term, deserve it. They don't fit the criteria. What are the penalties for fraud in the disability ecosystem, Andy?
Well, I don't know much about that. I haven't represented clients that got in trouble for that. I do remember one time when I was still working at a nonprofit, I had a client who had AIDS. And it was around the time where new treatments were coming out and people were going back to work because of the new treatments. So they did not have to be homebound all day because of diarrhea, right? They're not tired all day because of the drug treatment. So at that time, I remember Social Security actually sent a spy to spy on my client. And
wow.
And they took picture of him and say, well, you were able to go to the cafe, so why couldn't you go to work or something like that.
Yeah.
So and this is not unusual in the private insurance world. So if you look up like companies like Unum or Lincoln, there are stories of these investigators spying on claimants. Now I don't know what's the punishment. I never had to deal with a case like that, but in Social Security's world, I have seen Social Security says, not necessarily for fraud, but Social Security does sometimes say, you were never eligible for disability. So now you have to pay back $95,000. And here's a payment coupon, or you can call in with your credit card or something like that. So Social Security does ask for money back if they think that you were never eligible. And I assume that, the ERISA insurance company can do the same. Now, state disability, what I have seen is on the unemployment insurance side, I'm not a UI expert, but I have seen them saying, well, you misled us or something, so we're not going to pay you unemployment for this many weeks. But I have not seen it on the state disability side. Now, but again, state disability, if they thought that you were never eligible to begin with, they could ask you for the money back. But other than asking for the money that they paid you, I'm not sure if there's any more penalty. Like I've never seen someone be referred to the local DA or something.
And my sense is, though, there are also requirements in terms of, you have a deadline for filing for disability also. Walk us through that a little bit.
Okay, so it depends on what you're filing for. So if you're filing for a state disability claim, usually you should wait 7 days because that's your waiting period. 7 days from your onset day of disability. And then after that 7 days, then you have 49 days from your onset day to apply. After the 49 days, if you don't apply, they may deny your claim or adjust your onset date so that you are not applying 49 days after the onset date. So for state disability, there's that timeline that you have to adhere to. Of course, ERISA, they have all kinds of deadlines. And if somebody wants to apply for ERISA benefits, they really should follow those deadlines very closely. And it varies according to the ERISA policies. I've seen people be allowed to apply even before they go on the medical leave. Some people does have to wait for the waiting period to be over to apply. Sometimes it really depends on the third-party administrator. So a lot of companies, they don't administer their own disability. Their HR doesn't administer it. They contract it out to the third party, and they take care of all the leave issues. So if an employee applies for disability or medical leave, the third party would handle all the all the FMLA requests, applying for state disability, or at least alerting the employee of state disability, and also give them the application to apply for ERISA benefits. But one thing to keep in mind for people who want to look into applying for ERISA policy is that don't get frustrated and disappointed by the HR if you feel like they're not helping you. HR is not a benefits counselor. That's not their job. They will give you the bare minimum according to the law. So for example, the woman that worked for the bank, just because she didn't mention the word disability, right? She did not mention the word disability. The HR did not even alert her of her disability income benefits, right? So so a lot of times people get frustrated and disappointed when they feel like the HR is not helping them. So that's not their job.
Would you be the right person for them to go to if they have questions about these types of disability issues, right? Because if it's not the job of HR to do that, would it be somebody else that's in the company, or would that just be handled by a third party like you?
Well, it could be handled third party. So I certainly have helped a lot of people transition from work to disability.
Yeah.
My focus is on short-term disability.
Yeah. And what's the duration of that? Does that mean like 3 months to 6 months or something like that?
It depends on the client. Some people
okay.
like say, okay, I want to be off 3 months and I'll do something else later. Some people want to be off 6 months. There are sort of employee assistant programs that might be helpful, that large employers offer to their employee. But I would be careful with that because, it's still an employer sponsored, I don't know how confidential that is.
Yeah.
And then, I wrote the book because when my aunt became disabled, she was a dentist. She's still a dentist. When she became disabled, she complained to me that no one helped her. And when I visited her in the hospital, and she was very disappointed with her friend in HR who she thought betrayed her. But then I told her, it's like, would you expect your employer to help you get medical service, right? Just because you got your health insurance through your employer?
Yeah, yeah,
This
yeah.
thing, right?
It's a great point because you work at a large company. There might be 50,000 employees at the company, but it's so hard to know like, oh, what actually what's covered, right? I mean, they send
Mhm.
you all these things in the mail, but it's very hard to know that. And I gotta believe that if HR is in the business of making sure that people are productive, right? Then the disability angle of that is equally important because if somebody is disabled, they're probably not as productive as if they were full strength, you know?
No, this is where I feel like, do employers want people to go on disability or they don't? I feel like idealistically, employer would give the employee the time to rest. But then there's also the idea that, the employer, the company is to produce, right? But if the
Yeah,
employee is not producing, why are we keeping this employee?
yeah.
And shouldn't that employee be on disability
Mm,
to begin with? So there's all these, conflicting factors. I
sure.
was management before, when I worked for a nonprofit, we were, we had very limited resources. We needed someone to work to help our clients.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
so it's
it's there's a little bit of a gray areas. All right. Well, this has been a really interesting conversation. I did know these things about disability insurance and how you can help people be more productive, and when they have challenges, there are options for them to stay at least getting some cash flow coming in. Let's shift to the final four questions. The first one is, are there any books or media or maybe podcasts you've listened to that have guided your thinking?
when I wrote my book, three things really helped me in terms of media. One is there's this book written by Joe Moran. It's called First You Write a Sentence. So it really helped me, just write in a way
Sure.
that's easy for people to understand, reader-friendly writing way, instead of writing like a lawyer. Um, I've always loved T.S. Eliot's Four Quartets, and that really helped me when I was writing the book. It really helped me be sensitive to sentence structure and the way
Sure.
that the sentence sounds, And then the third thing is, I really love the Brahms symphonic cycle. So I wrote the whole book listening to the Brahms symphonic cycle by different directors and orchestra. So I
Ah,
would say that these three things helped me the most while I wrote the book.
very, very cool. I like
Yeah.
that. That's a good variety of kind of inspiration. What tools do you like using? And that could be a shovel, or it could be, a calendar tool. What are tools that you use a lot and you like more people should know about?
You know, I know this might sound bad, but I love my iPhone. I love my phone. It's so convenient, nowadays. I know people say all these bad things about the phone, but before like 20, 30 years ago, it's so hard to say hi to someone in Hong Kong or in New
Sure.
York. Now you can send a text. We're more connected. If we use it the right way, it's actually great for us to connect to each other. So I love my phone.
Awesome. Love that. What do you do outside of work?
I love to walk. I like urban hiking. My spouse and I, we walk all over San Francisco. We love to walk we live near Coy Tower, and we walk all the way to Presidio Heights and walk back. So that's a
How
whole
long
day.
is that?
The whole day.
It's a whole day.
Yes. Yeah. So
You
we
ever
go
heard
to,
of
go ahead.
Have you ever heard of geocaching? I think it's called geocaching. It's like you find little trinkets in the city based upon
Yeah.
like nearby things. It's like a scavenger hunt almost. Have you heard of this?
I heard of it. And there's something similar in the crypto world where you carry this little key thing and you're actually helping the crypto company or the network find things, and my little brother is into that. I don't know much about it, but yeah, I know what you're talking about, and it's kind of
Interesting.
big. Yeah.
Interesting. Cool. How can people find you?
AndyChuLaw.com, AndyChulaw.com. Yeah.
Simple. All right. Cool. Well, Andy Chu, it's been a pleasure speaking with you.
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks,
Really,
Mike.
really enjoyed the time.
Andy, this is a differentiator. This is not something we normally talk to. So thank you very much for doing this.
Yeah.
I thank you so much, Mike, for inviting me, and Ryan. This is fun.
Thanks for listening to Just Build Wealth. You can find the show notes for ideas referenced in this podcast and pick up a copy of The False Hope of Global Diversification at www.falsehopeglobaldiversification.com.
This podcast is free to listen to, but if you share, we can create more content and continue having excellent conversations. So, as my favorite podcast host, Jordan Harbinger, says, we rise by lifting others. Rate this in Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever